Hello, this is the source walkthrough of the game called Estepin Go. I tested this game and the leaderboards and they're functioning properly today. I just had to wait for leaderboards to load. It took more than a minute to load. That is because of Google Play. There's nothing I can do about that, unfortunately. This is the game. I already went through the UI, so what happens is that the UI is actually loading in this way. First of all, we've got a game setup script here which I'll load into Visual Studio Code. Most people use Visual Studio, but I use Visual Studio Code just because it's open source. So here we have the spawn main character function, which will basically spawn the character based on the outfit equipped player prefs, and there it is. And this is how the player will spawn, and this is basically how it'll spawn. So we'll go over and we will actually look at some of the other setups that we have. So if you go over to the player, any player, and we hit the edit graph, we will actually find that this is where the buttons are actually being handled. And you can see there is a state called move right, there's a state called move left, and there's an idle state. The movement is based on the buttons that you can actually see right now on the screen, which will be removed in the later. It's on later builds. It's on pointer up and pointer down, which actually changes the button input values local variable, which is basically here, I believe. There it is. This is for the accelerometer, but we are not using that. So this is the basically the buttons here, and there are the button values, and this is actually inside fixed update, the fixed update event, which will run after every, I believe, 0.02 seconds. We'll check for an input, and if an input is given, then it will actually load according to the input button value that it gets. So we can either move right or we can move left, and these are the custom trigger events that are actually moving the player left or right based on the value of the button input. So we're here and we are actually going to see the pointer up and pointer down functions, which are here. These are basically loading the correct custom event, or calling the correct custom event. This is the move right unit or state, and over here we also have the same super unit that you saw in the previous one, which is actually looking for the button inputs and also handling the values that are inside. If there is no value, that means we will go back to the idle state. If there is a value, which is controlled by this branch and this less unit, we will actually go ahead and check for the movement unit again, and we will actually move the player towards the right limit object which we have in the scene. The right limit is actually a game object, and it is an invisible object that the player can't see, but once the player actually reaches the right limit game object, it can't move any further. So that means that the object can actually move only to the right limit and not move any further. As soon as the distance between the right limit and the actual player is less than, I believe it's less than 1, the player will stop moving, and it will actually enter these units, which will actually disable the right movement animation and also set the rigid body to 0 so the player stops moving. It's the same for the left, except that the values are totally reverted because we're moving in the opposite direction. This is basically the code for the player movement. Other than that, if you look at the character, the animal spawner, over here we've got 3 levels. The third level is the hardest one, that you said that it becomes a little difficult to manage. We can actually change that anytime we want. We can go ahead and change the time to spawn to any value that we want, and the time to spawn will change here. On the start, the setting time, the time to spawn has been changed here, and the setting time lost is actually being changed here. The time lost, that is. The time lost is the time that is required. I think this variable is not being used, but I believe it was supposed to be used for actually indicating to the script or to the game how much time you've lost. And it is actually being used. We are actually adding fixed delta time, which is a fixed time to it, and as soon as it hits a certain limit, we are actually going to start spawning characters, or we'll continue spawning characters to be more precise. These functions right over here are the ones that are actually spawning the characters, and the characters, when they spawn, they get spawned here, and then we revert the time to spawn back to 0 so that the next character can spawn. This is the entire function for that. So once we hit a particular time value, the time actually resets itself so that the new character can spawn. So we're in this particular function, we are spawning character after every 2 seconds. This is the function for that. Then we go ahead and we take a look at one of the animals, which is over here. This is the state of one of the animals, and the prefabs are actually here. So if you go over to cat animal or any of the animals that are over here, we can actually take a look at their states. So we've got like 4 states. The one is the spawn routine, so as soon as the character spawns, it moves towards the window. These are the functions for that. So target 1 functions, and then we've got functions to trigger initial jump, which are here, which is basically nothing more than a force applied on the object. Then we've got the jump routine, which is basically a bunch of functions, which is handling the bounce functions, as well as the slide functions once the character hits the slide object, which is invisible. It's an invisible collider. We are also going to spawn some of the complements. This particular function is handling the animations of the object once it's in the air. So when it goes up, it plays the going up animation. When it goes down, it plays the going down animation. Over here we've got the first jump functions. Once we go to the slide functions, we've got the slide functions, which are basically just a bunch of movement functions, which are going to move the player towards different points on the slide. So we have got 3 targets, I believe. No, we've actually got 4 targets. I think there are 4, or there are 3 targets over here. There are 4 in total. So we've got all of these functions to move the character towards those functions, towards those game objects or transforms. We've also got the game over function, which is handling the blinking effect, and it also actually handles the game over routine for us, which is basically also show an ad at the end. We are also going to get the game over functions over here, and we also have the game over blinking effect functions over here, which is basically just a simple coroutine. So this is for the cat animal. It's the same basically for all of the animals, except that, like, if you take a look at the cow animal and I get its edit graph, the jump routine, the force applied is actually different. That's all. The force is different. Other than that, the basic function are the same. It's just the force that is applied on the object once it bounces is lower to represent more weight. So those are basically all of the functions. Other than that, we had the Cloud Once function and the gameplay UI functions, which are here. These are the standard gameplay UI functions for pause, click, setting the starting score. We've got remove ads button handling. We've got the pause button screen. We've got the game overload functions. The most important function probably in this is the try again and the second button's outfit button. Oh, these are just the buttons to load the correct screen. This is also important, but it's really going to set a application variable for the correct screen, so that when we go back to the main scene, this particular like if you click the outfit button, so there is actually a variable in the main screen that is handling these buttons. So what happens is that if I click the outfit button, then the outfit screen loads on the main screen once you go back to it. These are just application these are basically triggering an application variable, which I believe is screen to show. Yeah, this is that variable. Then we've got game over functions right here. Then we also have, let me just open up the game over screen if I can find it. There it is. And in the game over screen we have this button here, which is game over button, scores button. This is an important button because it will show the leaderboard for the Cloud Once variable, Cloud Once plugin. The CloudRuns plugin is over here, and the proof of the game actually working is right over here. Your ID is passed over here, and the cloud IDs are passed over here. So that's why the leaderboards are working. So that is basically the source code walkthrough. If you have any questions regarding this, do let me know. I'll try my best to help if at that time I can. But like, it's my recommendation that this source code not be touched unless like something very significant has to be changed. Then only it can be touched. Otherwise, everything's working as intended. Changing a variable might actually break the entire game.